Welcome to the Ricky Matthews Show from the Citizens Bank Studio. Hope you're having a great day. As today is Friday, and we're back on track with my friend Jeff Duncan from NOLA.com and the Times-Picayune on the end of what's been a great week for shows, just terrific shows. If you missed them, you can go to the SuperTalk YouTube page or the SuperTalk Gulf Coast Facebook page or the Ricky Matthews Facebook page. But you'll find the show. Go to your favorite podcast. Check in with this week. It's been really a good week on this show. So, Jeff, I was, well, first of all, good to see you, my friend.
Yeah, it's been a while. It's a little break, but it's good to be back in the fold.
Yeah, it is. Listen, what I was about to say is I really enjoyed the NOLA.com Times-Picayune Saints Insider newsletter this morning. For those of you who have not signed up, it's really easy to do. You just go to NOLA.com and go to sports, and there'll be a prompt there that gives you the ability, especially this time of year. If you're a Saints fan and you don't get this newsletter, you're really missing out. But every morning in your inbox, you'll get a rundown of what's happening. And the team at NOLA.com and the Times-Picayune, they take turns writing the particular newsletter. And Jeff Duncan, as just so happens, wrote the one today. And there is so much there, from Trevor Penning to discussion about Breezy's improved selectiveness, and it goes on and on. Just a lot of good stuff. But man, you guys, there's a lot of news. One of the things I wanted to point out is that Colin Cowherd has predicted that our coach is going to be the first one to be fired. I think that's total bull. That is not going to happen. But
yeah, it's a good.
When you see stuff like that, what do you think?
Well, it's just a good example of the national. First of all, we're in the land of hot takes, right? And that's what Colin Cowherd has to do. I have a lot of respect for him, actually. I think he does a really good job, but it's a good example of why I would encourage people to ignore a lot of the national media, because they're not there every day. Colin Cowherd is just looking at the NFL landscape and surmising that, if the Saints start slow, something might, the job tenuousness of Dennis Allen, but he just doesn't understand the complexities of the Saints organization. They never, ever fire midseason. They never make a coaching change midseason. It's just the way they operate, for better or worse. That's how they work. That's the way they work with the New Orleans Pelicans. So any move that would be made, if it were to come to that for Dennis Allen, would happen after the season. Unless, I guess the one exception would be if the rails completely fell off and they started 0-11 or something crazy. That's the only scenario I could see. But I actually, talking to Dennis Allen yesterday, he's really encouraged. I mean, I think they're very excited about the season. I can tell you right now, that they don't foresee a lack of success this season.
I know they don't. Listen, man, of course, I had the opportunity to chat with you. I follow your coverage and your team's coverage very closely. I follow the team on all the social media. So I'm watching the videos and I'm seeing what's happening at the team. I love the new offensive scheme. I love the fact that they're going to be using Taysom Hill more effectively. At least it certainly appears that way. If the Saints can stay healthy, that's always the case. If you always say if they can stay healthy, but the scheme is good. And the defensive line's going to be, it may be one of the best defensive lines in the certainly a top 5 for sure. Man, it's incredible the adjustments they made since last year.
Well, I'm agreeing with you on the scheme and Taysom Hill use. I think that's both those things are encouraging. I'm not quite as sold yet on the defensive line, and I'll tell you why. I mean, first of all, Chase Young has looked terrific. I was out there for a week watching him. He looks healthy, looks very much more athletic than I thought he'd be after coming off back surgery and knee surgery. That was my concern is, how is he going to be able to move coming off these procedures? He's moving great. But, I work with a guy named Matt Paris, and Matt Paris covered Chase Young for multiple years with the Commanders when he was younger and less beaten up. And he said he was always like this in training camp. He said one year no one could block him. He was the most dominant player he'd ever seen. And then he had 1.5 sacks in 10 games. So, they're playing against mainly backups right now. If you watch the 49ers game, almost all their players were backups. So, there's got to be context to what we're watching, and I try to provide that all the time. The 49ers defense, they started one defensive starter of their 11 starters. Imagine if the Saints did that. Imagine if their defense had no starters except one guy. You'd be saying, well, that's not our defense. So I'm just trying to provide context for people before they, I'll need to see it during the season before I'll buy it. Now, it might happen, but I'm going to wait and see.
As you would normally do. That's Jeff Duncan, because you're close to the team and you're a realist and you don't get all the hype, and that's what you're paid to do.
Well,
and you
a few weeks ago, Ricky, was everybody going over the moon about Spencer Rattler?
Yeah.
How's that going? How's that going? Yeah.
That's my point. He's a rookie.
That's my point. I mean, the hype machine, they were talking about him starting over Derek Carr. Come on, man.
Well, Derek Carr, look, he looks good, and he's more focused, and he's approached this season in a different way than he's done past seasons. And that's going to be interesting to watch. As far as the offensive line, people still talking about Trevor Penning, but one of the things you guys wrote about, by the way, this morning I actually watched every single play that Penning did, and he did a fairly good job in this thing. I think some people are criticizing him because he's blocking a little bit too high on pass coverage and whatever, but overall, I think he did pretty good based on what I could see, and these are untrained eyes. Mm-hmm. But that there's also some competition, which I think is going to push him a little bit. What's your thought on the latest as it relates to Trevor Penning?
Yeah, look, I thought he did play better against the Niners. Again, it was against backups, so I sound like a broken record. But look, there's a reason the Saints have started working in Oli Udoh with the first team. They're trying to light a fire under Trevor Penning. They're trying to send a message, create some competition there, seeing if they can, get the best out of him. He's clearly the guy they want to win the job. He's clearly the most talented of the two. But right now, they've got concerns up front. We did our podcast yesterday, Saints Insider podcast, and, we're talking about the weapons the Saints have with Taysom Hill and Alvin Kamara and Chris Olave, and now Juwan Johnson's back. And, none of that's going to matter if they can't block people up front. So they've got to get the offensive line in shape. And right now, I think they've got 3 of the 5 positions in good shape, but left guard and right tackle are major question marks. And then if they get any injuries to the other guys, their depth is really shaky. So that's my main concern right now is this offense, the new scheme? You can be the greatest play caller in the world, but if you can't block anybody, it's not going to matter. And right now they've got 2 really major problems. Every team, Ricky, that plays the Saints is going to see this, and they're going to attack those areas with their best defensive linemen. It's a ruthless league. And until Trevor Penning can prove he can pass protect, they're going to have to help him out, I think.
Dennis Allen was criticized by the way he publicly took on Kendre Miller. What's your thoughts on that situation?
I didn't see that. I didn't know that. I like what he's doing. That's what a coach does. A coach, first of all, I didn't think he said anything that wasn't factual. So this is the day and age we're in, Ricky. I'm going to get on my soapbox now. But, if you just say the facts about somebody, you're now throwing them under the bus. No, Kendre Miller has thrown himself under the bus by not taking care of himself, by not being a professional. He's caused this, not Dennis Allen. Let's get it straight. And right now he's in the doghouse, and probably rightfully so. They've given him a lot of chances. And I think, patience is worn so thin that if he doesn't come around soon, they may move on. And that would be pretty eye-opening considering they invested a 3rd-round pick in him just a year ago.
Hey, you think about what Alvin Kamara does during the offseason. You see the videos, there's never going to be any question about whether he's going to come in ready or not, even if he's there's some question about what he's doing during the pre-camp activities. But is there a concern that Kendre Miller's not doing similarly, that he's just not prepared?
I heard of some things like that, but I think it's more just being an all-around pro, And look, there were some concerns on him coming out of TCU. I had an NFL player tell me this past week he played with a coach that was on the TCU staff, and when he called him after the Saints drafted Kendre Miller, said, "Hey, what's going on here? We drafted Kendre Miller. What can you tell me about him?" He goes, "Good luck."
Really?
Yeah. So, I think we're seeing sometimes these things play out. That could be a miss. I mean, I think the jury's out on Kendra Miller.
He's got talent, but again, we've seen some incredible talent go to hell in a handbasket because the mental part of the game wasn't there, and that's really important.
It's about maturity and understanding the need to. It's your job now, and you've got to put in the work, and that's why I wrote the column I wrote about the running back position. I still think it's a major issue. Dennis Allen yesterday said, "I like our backs." We'll see about that. I think we'll see that once the season starts, that could be an area of concern.
Well, we will see for sure. Hey, listen, when we come back on the other side, we're going to talk about a really interesting kicking battle. We've talked about it before, but it's just interesting. It's very interesting. And we got a leg on our team right now. He may not make the team, but it's still an interesting story. We'll see after this break. Welcome back to the Ricky Matthews Show from the Citizens Bank Studio. I have Jeff Duncan from NOLA.com and the Times-Picayune, and we're talking about Saints. So much news, obviously, coming out of the Saints camp as they wind it down and get ready for the regular season. We're already almost there. It's incredible. But listen, you and I have talked about this before, and for people who have not really been paying attention, Blake Grupe, the kicker for the Saints last year, had an okay year, but missed some really important field goals that would have won some games for him, and they're makeable field goals he should have made. And so there's, so we kind of fast forward. They bring in another guy. He's from Ireland. It's a hell of a story. Never kicked an American football game before. It's a really great story, but it ended up becoming kind of a battle. So Jeff, you've been really close to this, and you're writing about it. In fact, you wrote about it. How do you read this?
Well, I think the way you look at it is you've got two good kicking prospects, so it's a good problem to have. And I think what I could see happening, especially considering the circumstances. I mean, if you're Dennis Allen, you're not really in a position to take a lot of risks right now. I mean, you've got to win this season. Can you imagine he goes with an unproven commodity, a kicker, and week 3 they're playing the Falcons in Atlanta, and he misses a game-winning field goal? Can you imagine the backlash of that? So I think Dennis Allen's probably thought of that circumstance. And I think he's going to go with the known commodity. And the advantage they have in keeping Charlie, and the fact that Charlie Smith came, he's Irish, he came through the International Pathways program. You get a roster exemption on the practice squad for him. So it doesn't cost them anything to keep him. They got to pay him, but it doesn't cost them, relatively speaking, much money. And they can basically have him here a year and develop him. I mean, the guy is as inexperienced as possibly you can be at the NFL level. It's impossible to be less experienced. So, that's a really critical position. And I think even though Grupe wasn't outstanding a year ago, he was probably just right around average. He's still a proven commodity, and I don't think Dennis Allen's in position to take.
And listen, the competition makes Grupe better. Yep. There's no doubt about that, is there?
But I'll say this. I mean, Charlie Smith's got a rare leg. I mean, that's a rare ability. He's kicking them from 60 to 70 yards routinely and almost effortlessly. That doesn't happen very often. That's a weapon to have. We were talking on the sidelines as we watched him on the field the other night making those, and we've seen that before, I should say. That wasn't rare. I mean, he does that pretty regularly. If you had expanded rosters, if maybe you had 70 roster spots on the active roster, it'd be worthwhile, I think, to keep 2 kickers when you have a weapon like him, and you could have Grupe for the 50 yards and in, but just to have a guy that, if you're all of a sudden, Ricky, you're on the 35-yard line, you're almost in field goal range. Think about it, your own 35. That's rare, and you can win a game that way. But until they get to the expanded rosters, I think, it's going to be difficult to keep 2.
Hey, so for people who have not really followed this story, Jeff gave you sort of a high-level view of it, but where did he come from? That's the fascinating part of the story.
Well, he came from a little town in England called Mayobridge, England, and he competed in the Gaelic Athletic Association, like Gaelic football, which is really kind of a hybrid between soccer and rugby. So he'd never played American football. And he kept applying, probably started about 4 or 5 years ago when he was, I think, 19. Started, sending letters to the NFL trying to get his foot in the door. And that's what this American Pathways Program is, our International Pathways Program, and the IPP they call it. It allows international prospects to have a pathway into the NFL. They have to get into tryouts. And look, Charlie Smith was invited to the combine, so it wasn't like he was completely off the radar. He was at the combine this year, along with about 8 other international kickers. I think 2 or 3 of them ended up in camps too. So I think this is going to be more common. We've seen it for years with Australian punters. Both the Saints punters right now are Australian. So it's very common for the punters. Kickers, it's slowly becoming more and more of a commonality. And I think what's really interested Smith, I think what's made him an interesting prospect is, for a guy with as little experience as he has, he's come along really quickly. He's improved. Even Dennis Allen said he's improved a lot since we've seen him with his consistency. But the NFL level, the consistency is elite, and he's just not there yet right now. But I think he's the perfect candidate. If you remember a few years ago, they did this with Blake Gillikin, who was a great punting prospect, but they already had Thomas Morstead, and they kept Gillikin on the practice squad for a year and developed him, and then he took over for Morstead. You could argue that was a mistake, but my point is I could see that happening with Charlie Smith.
Listen, it's really interesting. I saw this graphic the other day that shows where there's a dot in Africa, and they looked at the top 100 fastest men globally over the years, and they're all from the same region of Africa, and many of the dots are in the same freaking town.
Yep.
The reason I bring that up is simply to make the point that one of the great things about the international program is that it's going to give you an opportunity to really tap into some rare talent that would otherwise, we wouldn't know who they were. And I saw some of his highlight films from Gaelic. Is that how you say it?
Yes.
The sport. Some of his highlights, and he had a boomer there. I mean, he was known for having a boomer foot, Yeah,
that's how he got on the radar. And look, he worked at it. I mean, he worked at it a long time. But I think this think what one of Roger Goodell's legacies as NFL commissioner is going to be the fact that he opened up American football to become a more global sport. I mean, they're playing games overseas. They've opened up this Pathways program for years. It was rare to see an international player in the NFL. Now there, a lot of Canadian players. The Saints have a backup guard right now, Kyle Hergel, who's undrafted free agent who's playing real well. He might make the team or make the practice squad. He's from Canada. David Onyemata was from Canada. I think that's something that's changed a lot since I've started covering the team.
Hey, do you see any? It's great to see Juwan Johnson back. Incidentally, he kind of snapped back pretty quickly considering he had foot surgery. Do you see any other lingering issues as it relates to injuries?
Well, they say Rashid Shaheed's going to be fine. I think that's one to watch. That's one that got me a little concerned just because toes tend to be a little finicky. I think he's a critical guy. We did a pod the other day, and I said, look, to me, the whole receiving corps, the success of it relies on Rashid Shaheed. I think we know what Chris Olave is, and I think we kind of know what's behind him. They're kind of, third, fourth receiver types. But Shaheed's got potential. Can he stay healthy? He's not a big guy. That's my concern is, this is Jim Hasley used to always say, Ricky, this is a big man's game. And you tend to see these smaller guys get hurt. It's just the way it is. If you remember Deontay Hardy came into the NFL like a house of fire, made the all-pro team as a return specialist, and he's been basically banged up and hurt ever since because he's not a big guy. It's rare to have a guy like a Darren Sproles that's durable. So I think that's the concern I have with Shaheed.
Chris Olave, speaking of, he's not the biggest guy in the world, and man, he has been there constantly in practice and games. Mm-hmm. He's a really good player, isn't he?
Yeah, and I think what I like the most is his synchronicity with Derek Carr has really gotten good. Remember last year they had all kinds of problems, well documented. They look like the definite go-to connection now. Now they got to get Juwan Johnson back in the fold. Alvin Kamara just got back. He's got to get back in the fold. They don't have Rashid Shaheed. That's the concern right now. I think I've talked to you about before. this offense is going to have growing pains, man. It is going to struggle early. I'm telling you, it will. I know it looks great at times right now, but they've only really scored one touchdown of the starting group. So, like, they're going to struggle early on. It's not going to just come out and average 35 points a game. And they've got to get these guys in the lineup that they're counting on. And that early schedule is just brutal. You know, Cowboys, Eagles, Chiefs, Falcons, they could play well and lose those games. So to me, this whole season, if you want me to jump to the big picture, and I'm not quite there where I'm at with this team, we'll have our media poll we always do next week in NOLA.com where I survey all the media. I'm concerned about the first 5-6 games. Can they survive that? That, to me, is the biggest issue with this team. They could be better than they were a year ago and be 1-5. I'm not kidding you. And if that happens, the fan base is going to be apoplectic. Can Dennis Allen and the staff keep them together? Can the leaders of the team, if they start 2-4, and hold it together, considering the expectations from the past few years they fell short of? That, to me, is the season.
Yeah, speaking of Juwan Johnson, we expected him to make an impact day one last year, and he didn't really come on to the end of the season. If he could pick up where he left off, that would be great to see. That's for sure. Hey, listen, Jeff, it's been great to spend some time with you. I really want to encourage people to sign up for the NOLA.com Times-Picayune Saints newsletter. Just go to NOLA.com. You'll be glad. If you're a Saints fan, you'll definitely be glad you did, because this team is covering the Saints like a blanket, and you'll have the opportunity to get the sort of the regular stuff coming out of Jeff Duncan. Jeff, it's been a pleasure to spend time with you, my friend.
Thanks, Ricky. Great to be back. See you next week, buddy.
You bet. We'll see you right after this break.